How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today we're talking about the brutal truth about Colorado winters. No, it is not all skiing and sunshine. It gets cold, it gets windy, it gets dry. We're here to talk about that and more, and we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everts. There are two things we try to accomplish here. First, we talk all things eating, living, breathing, experiencing the Denver Metro, the Colorado Front Range. And two, as a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and teaming with some of the state's most talented realtors, we're helping people like you move to this beautiful state of ours. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person, answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails there when and if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is the brutal truth about Colorado winters. All right, so this is a video that I like to make every 2 years or so. I mean, every year gets pretty redundant, but this is one of the many questions that I get from people who are thinking about moving to Colorado is, what is that winter like, especially around the Denver Metro and the Front Range? And, you know, while you can Google average temperatures and average snowfall, what is your actual experience here like? Because if you look at videos, you see a lot of blue skies and you see people skiing in a t-shirt and hiking year-round and snowshoeing on the couple days of snow, when the reality is a bit different than that. I'd say that, you know, the Colorado Front Range is an incredible place to live, but winter is still winter. Not quite Game of Thrones winter, but it does get cold here. And it's a great marketing ploy, you know, for the state overall to just imagine this world in which 365 days of the year you want to get outside. But if you want to get outside for the 180 roughly days, you know, where it gets colder, let's plan accordingly for that. So while there are other things that we will get into, the first thing I'm going to tell you about Colorado winters is your skin is going to get dry and it's going to crack. Now, you're probably saying, now wait a minute, dude, I want to hear about driving, I want to hear about traffic up to the ski lifts, I want to hear about just cold in and out. But when I tell you to pay attention to how dry your skin is going to get, I mean it, because every winter you're going to see people walking around with hands that look not quite leper-like, but there's cracks, there's blood. You know, when we say put on a lot of lotion, we're not kidding. And the reason I lead with it is because it gets you so fast. My wife loves to tell me to put on lotion, and I put on lotion as often as I can, and still there's that random day where all of a sudden I've got 2 or 3 knuckles, or especially the tips of my fingers, love cracking, and it sucks. It is one of the most unbearable parts of winter in Colorado, and that is why I lead with it. Now, a slightly, less serious and a little more humorous aspect to this is it's so dry that your body becomes like a human Tesla coil, where any friction, you know, static electricity is a thing. During the winter, I'm pretty sure both of my dogs want to bite me because I'm constantly zapping them with my static magno-electric abilities. And so I would say a key element is the humidifier. And people, again, you're gonna hear that. You're gonna Google that. You're gonna see it in a Reddit column. And you're probably gonna brush it off. And you're gonna think, it's not that big a deal. I'm telling you, get a humidifier. And don't get one of the cheap ones that don't work very well or don't run very well. Get a humidifier that's going to work well for your home. Your skin is going to appreciate it. And this is coming from a guy who doesn't take the best care of his skin. I mean, I know I still have a baby face, but you're going to be thankful that you have that humidifier. So again, dry skin, get a humidifier. Muy importante. Now, as we mentioned in the beginning, when you think about Colorado, a lot of the wording you get is the fact that we have 300 days of sunshine. And while it's closer to like 250, 260, we do get a lot of sunshine here. Here's the thing about winter sun. One, it's a UV trap. You know, you will get sunburn fast in Colorado during the winter, especially if you're in the mountains, and especially if you don't realize that the sun reflects off of snow and off of ice. In fact, the worst sunburn, shouldn't say worst, but one of the worst sunburns I have ever had in my life was the very first time I went ice fishing, because while I covered up everything over top, I didn't realize how much sun glare I was getting from the ice fried. So, you know, we get a lot of sunshine. Just remember sunscreen, just remember that sun is pounding down on you. It's something that you need to be aware of in general. The other caveat of having all of this sun is that we brag in Colorado about the fact that, we get some snow, but it's okay because the sun comes out, it melts all the snow. And that does work a lot of the time, especially if you have a south-facing driveway. That's something we'll talk about. However, one of the elements of this that occurs quite often is you'll have a really good snowstorm. The sun will come out, it'll melt it, it'll become kind of a slushy, puddly mess for a little while. And that's whatever. I mean, anywhere you deal with slush. But then you get into the early evening, you get a really cool, cold, freeze over this now watery, slushy mess, turns into black ice, turns your roads into a disaster. Again, does this happen all the time? No, but it tends to happen after you get a pretty good snowfall where it accumulates. You get some sun to blast it, to melt a good layer of it, but not all the way. So you have that white, packed snow road where it gets that layer of melt, then it freezes again. That is danger Will Robinson territory. Now, playing off of all this snow stuff is the fact that, there are a few things quite as pretty to me as a fresh snowfall. When everything is white and it's crisp and it's like quiet out, it's fantastic. To say that Denver and the Front Range doesn't stay white, it doesn't stay with that cool mix. It gets very brown, and it gets very brown quickly. Now, our weather in general leads to that. I always joke we don't tend to have much of a dark, deep green here, at least in the early springtime. Usually we get into more of like a greenish yellow tinge. Well, in the winter, that all goes out the window. You're just gonna see a lot of brown. You're gonna see a lot of dead grass. You will see snow that, again, especially on the roads, side of roads, turns brown really quick. So it's not as picturesque. Also, to keep in mind that the white, the snow caps, everything, that's the mountains. And Denver is not in the mountains. We're on a high plains desert. So you've got the white capped snow, snowy mountains in the background. It's beautiful. It really is. Just everything from there moving into the Front Range, that's where you see a lot of brown. Now, when we talk about the actual weather, getting into the snowfall. So for the most part, the Front Range, the Denver metro area, our weather is pretty mild. Yeah, we'll get pounded with some snowstorms here and there. There's usually, a couple really good ones each year, and then you'll get your snowstorms here and there. It certainly gets cold. You'll have your moments. We usually have, again, like a stretch of 5 or 6 days where the temperature hovers around zero, but it's not extended. For the most part in our winters, you deal with a lot of days in the 20s and 30s. Cold, yes. Completely unbearable, no. That's, when people move here from the Midwest, they kind of laugh about how cold it gets. Of course, I believe New England is the coldest I've ever been because of how humid and wet it gets, but the dry coldness. Now, one thing that will change all of this in a hurry is how windy the Denver metro, and especially as you get farther east, you get into Aurora and areas farther away from the mountains, that wind will crush you. And it tends to blow in. You get the late afternoon, I say late afternoon, not early evening, that 3-4 o'clock in the winter time wind that picks up. It is a doozy. So that is one of those elements that you want to be aware of. Again, overall, I believe that our winters are pretty mild from strictly a weather standpoint, but that mild can change real quick when that wind blows through. Now, let's dive into driving, because driving is a key element for wintertime. And I'm not taking this in any particular order, so let's just start with people who really love their cars and they want to make sure that their cars are taken care of. So here in Colorado, they don't just use salt on the roads, they use magnesium chloride. And so it does a pretty good job of melting the snow, does a pretty good job of clearing the roads. However, it sticks to your car. So your car will tend to have this just coat of dust and filth all over it. And again, there are people that they wash their car multiple times. One of the things to look out for, especially if you've not lived in a community or in a part of the country in which snow is common, is that you'll have snow, it melts, the roads are still kind of wet, there's still elements, there's evidence of snow that has occurred. Don't wash your car yet. I'm gonna throw that out to you right now, because there's still gonna be some wet spots. There's still gonna be cars that are throwing around said wet spots. That magnesium chloride is in those areas. Your car will get dirty again. But Again, that magnesium chloride, it sticks to the car, it sticks to your undercarriage. It's just a different type of substance. So if you are someone who really cares about how clean their vehicle is, just be prepared. You're going to want to clean your car more often. Now, perhaps more frustrating to people when it comes to driving in Colorado is that, first and foremost, prepare for everyone to get amnesia as it begins to snow. And I say amnesia because they start to act as though they have never driven in the snow before. And I get, there's probably some people watching this video right now who are saying to themselves, you know, I've never really driven in snow before. That's cool. I understand that occurs. It's people who have driven in it before who suddenly they just kind of forget. They forget the fact that your car doesn't handle the same way, that having a rear wheel drive vehicle and going up a hill from a stop is probably not going to be beneficial for you. So it's really something that they need to be aware of, and something you need to be aware of. That especially early on, like I'm making this video in the middle of November. We have not had our first snow yet, but it's kind of some rumors that it's coming. We know those first handful of snows, the roads, I mean, it's like a dead stop. People are just trying to figure out their little Muppets behind a wheel. So just be prepared for that each year. Those first handful of snows, it's always a bit of a getting that hamster wheel to go, takes a little time, and then we're off to the races. Now, while you're doing this and while you're preparing for winter in Colorado, I want you to prepare with your all-wheel drive vehicle. At least front-wheel drive, but all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, whatever. Rear-wheel drive in Colorado is okay if you are staying on flat streets everywhere you go. The problem with that is there's not a lot of areas in the whole Denver metro area that are just flat. There's gonna be hills. So all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, but here's the other element to this. All-wheel drive and four-wheel drive does not mean all-wheel stop. Stopping is a completely different situation. We've already talked about ice to some extent. Your stopping power, or stopping ability, I don't think it's power, stopping ability really comes down to how prepared you are. So what I encourage anyone and everyone to do, especially again if you've never driven in snow, is the first time you get a good snowpack, take your car out, go to a parking lot that has plenty of room. You know, no light poles, just things that will give you a chance, and drive your car around. Try stopping, try turning your wheel, try turning your wheel and hitting your brake. Get a feel for how you react. Like there's certain times where you steer into a slide, and then there's certain times where you steer out of it. It just depends on the situation. So I would practice, but I would really get a feel for stopping. Now, here's where I'm gonna make some people mad, because there are different types of drivers in the snow. There's the person that drives like 15 miles an hour, where the snow isn't that bad and you could drive faster. But at the same time, I understand it. I get it. I understand the need for safety. I just hope that you're not holding me up. That's basically what I could say. Then there is the absolute moron who typically is driving like a big ass truck that is not going to stop if they needed to, and they're going absurdly fast. Like they're still doing 50 on a service road where the speed limit is 35 to 40. And on top of everything, it happens to be just slick as can be out. And this is when you're driving and you can't see where the lanes are. Everybody is just kind of somewhere on the road. And then here comes, it's a Chad. Here comes Chad in his dually, even though he's never put anything in the bed of his truck, and he's flying. So if you want to be that guy, I mean, have at it. I mean, just be aware that stopping is not going to be your strength. Now, last couple things here that I would mention in all seriousness. Our winter, and especially late, I feel like I'm going to give one of those stories like, you know, back in the 80s, it used to snow, but this is real. When I was growing up, it was typical that the first snow would come right around Halloween. And I remember because our parents would always talk about it. Our costumes had to have some element of warmth to it. This year it was cold on Halloween, but nowhere near snow. Again, we are now almost a week from Thanksgiving, basically, still no snow. A few years back, we didn't have snow in Denver, in the metro area, until the day before New Year's Eve. It was December 30th or the 29th. That we finally got, so it might have even been New Year's Eve, but it was, you know, past Christmas, we had had no snow. Now at the same time, on the flip end of this, our winters last longer than you think they are going to last. So we get into spring. We get into April, May. It's not unusual for us to have a snowstorm in May and even late May. There's been times where Memorial Day is coming up and we get a good snow. March and April tend to be our most wintry months. I mean, that's when you get a lot of snow, you get a lot of moisture. If it's warm, obviously you're getting a lot of rain going into especially April, but a lot of times it just hasn't warmed up enough. So you get a ton of snow. And one of the things that tends to happen, it feels like again almost every year, is that the leaves start to bloom. We get into that springtime, you get just enough warm weather, you think we're past it. Leaves start to bloom on the trees, and then we get hit with a snowstorm. The hope is that snowstorm is pretty light, but a lot of times, and even a few years ago, we had a really heavy, thick snow, and it landed on all these trees that had leaves on it, which, again, if you're not familiar, that is not good for trees. So you've got not just small branches, you've got like tree limbs snapping from the weight of this snow. No bueno. So the moral of this story is, if you find yourself getting into, late March, early April, don't necessarily start planning your camping trips and getting out and enjoying the sun quite yet. You're probably still in for a good snowfall or 2 or 6. And then the last 2 things I would mention. One, again, just being a realist, talking to a lot of people who ski and snowboard, unless you have a work schedule that is extremely flexible, or maybe you live in the mountains, don't expect to ski as often as you think you might. Now again, should you buy a pass, Epic, Acon, any of those things, that's gonna be up to you. But people who are like, man, I'm gonna get up to the slopes every weekend, I'm gonna go every other week. One, I-70 traffic is going to have a conversation with you, especially if you are a Friday, up, Sunday back, or just in general, a weekend I-70, our big east-west highway that leads into all these ski slopes. Traffic is usually a disaster come wintertime, and especially on those 2 days. Friday going up, Sunday coming down. The time, the cost. These ski slopes are crazy expensive. I mean, you're talking even reasonable slopes where it's $150, $175 to ski. Others, some of your higher price ones, $250, $300 for a day pass. Again, there are season passes that people always do the math for. If I can go 3 times, if I can go 4 times, they pay for themselves. Certainly an option. What I would just say, based on conversations I have with people who are avid skiers or snowboarders who love to go, the constant is between the traffic and the cost, each year we go less and less. Typically I go 20 times, this year I went 10. Typically I go 12 times, this time I went 4. Typically I go 4 times, this year I went 1. Just be aware of that. And who knows, maybe get into snowshoeing, it's cheaper and you don't have to go as far up the mountain. And then the last thing I mentioned, because I see it all the time and I hear it all the time, is your light puffer jacket that's good for 50-degree weather. Have something heavier in your car. People will start out, again, the sun's out, there's no wind yet. That jacket, it feels great. I mean, you're sweating, like you feel like you're in good shape. And then the sun, dips behind a cliff. It starts to get later in the day, the wind picks up a little bit, and all of a sudden you are freezing. So we always say in Colorado, be versatile. Have an extra jacket in the car, wear a thicker layer. It is easier to take off layers than to obviously not have layers when you really need them. So that light, fashionable jacket that does not keep you warm, especially if you're gonna be doing outdoor stuff, be forewarned, that's not gonna end well. But listen, we can talk about the negatives to winter here in Colorado. It is and will remain one of those states where a lot of people, they want to get outside, they want to enjoy, they want to experience. I just want to be real with you of some of the things that you should anticipate driving, getting out to your ski slopes, what you're going to see visually. There's a reason that most of my drone footage that I take is during the spring and summer when things are not really as pretty in the fall and winter, especially when the snow gets brown. But any questions you have as you're preparing for a potential move, that's a perfect opportunity to hit me up with a phone call, with a text, with an email. Know that I am always the person answering those. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. That was the brutal truth about Colorado winters. Until I see you next time, peace.